This is speed. 3,500 pounds speeding through 3 dozen competitors. Sometimes, oft-times, they don't make it. It is noisy, spectacular, dangerous speed. Proud speed for fame and fortune. Run before thousands, no, millions of rabid fans. The artful practice of speed in racing American stock cars. And this is the most successful practitioner ever of the art. This man, Richard Petty, the king of speed. For the next few minutes, you'll ride with Richard Petty through the streets of his hometown, Level Cross. 220 miles an hour down a superspeedway straightaway. You'll share his best moments and some of his worst. Watch horrified with Richard as his father, Lee, nearly dies. Meet his son, Kyle, the third generation of racing Pettys. Get to know the king the way his competition knows him. Buckle up. This is going to be fast. Let's start in Level Cross, North Carolina. This is the red clay bed from which springs the lush green that is the birthplace of Richard. The home of one of auto racing's most respected and envied enterprises, and the place where Richard returns when his days of thunder turn to night. For one who is so clearly king, he seems so comfortable, so down to earth. Listen to him. See if I'm not right.
Hi, I'm Richard Petty. My family's racing tradition started here probably 40 years ago, and racing has really changed a lot. What I'd like to do is take you on a tour of my career and show you what I think is the world's best sport, which is Winston Cup racing.
Richard's sport, stock car racing, is no longer a series of renegade whiskey-running weekends on the dirt. It's grown, but this man remains virtually the same as he was in the beginning. Today, stock car racing is America's #1 spectator sport, drawing millions to its high-tech, high-speed thrills every weekend. From the beginning, it's been a mutual admiration society. Here's what I mean. A man who drove his Ford to work every day lived and died with the Fords come the weekend stock car races. Didn't matter who was driving. That's my Ford down there, who's battling those Chevys and Olds and Mercurys for bragging rights. As time went by, those fans started to choose their racing heroes. And their names were Joe Weatherly, Curtis Turner, David Pearson, Freddie Lorenzen, Junior Johnson, Bobby Isaac, Lee Petty. They were a rugged, hard-driving, hard-living collection, many of whom feathered their reputations with wild and romantic tales of moonshine runs on the way to the track. Today, the colorful whiskey-running renegades have been replaced with media-driven superstars. But before that ever happened, there was the coronation of a king. Stock car racing was much like the early pro golf tour, blessed with wonderful characters, marvelous champions. But neither sport truly grabbed America's attention until a swashbuckling, charismatic warrior came along. In golf, it was Arnold Palmer who took the game to its current popularity. As for stock car racing, it was a skinny good old boy from Level Cross, North Carolina.
He was my hero when I was just a little guy, looking up to all these racers. I started racing when I was 5 years old. Richard was racing back then. He was my hero, and I just grew up watching him and idolizing him, and it's really neat that I finally grew up and got out and could race against a guy that was my hero when I was just a little kid, and that's Richard Petty.
He is what heroes are made of. He is definitely hero material. He has always been a hero, and yet he's always lived up to the stature that people put him in.
To me, he'll always be the king, whether he wins another race or whether he doesn't. It's always going to be in my eyes as Richard Petty the king.
He is, quite simply, the king. His records likely will stand for at least as long as we live. The only one to ever reach the 200 victory plateau in a major racing series. No one else has ever won 7 Daytona 500s. No one else has won 7 Winston Cup driving championships. He's earned over $7 million. Car 43 and its colorful driver became the symbol of racing excellence. Johnny Rutherford and his friends became famous. Once upon a time, you could walk into a showroom on Monday and buy the exact same model these men raced on Sunday. That's why they called them stock cars. But like the cars, everything's grown up and changed since Richard Petty began working on his daddy's Plymouth old number 42.
Dad decided he borrowed a car from somebody to go run, and like a 48 Buick 4-door, run fast on the highway, so they thought it'd run fast on the racetrack. And we drove over there, and they pulled in the service station, changed the oil, greased the thing, everything before the race started, went out and ran about half the race and turned it over, and it took 2 wreckers to pull it off the racetrack, and they had to put it on a truck to get it back home. And then the next car he got was like a 49 Plymouth Coupe, which he said the Buick was too heavy. He'd get something real light, it wouldn't break all the pieces on it. And me and Mother and Morris and Daddy got in a race car. We drove to the race. We got out, wandered around in the infield or went to the grandstand, I don't know. Daddy ran the race, and then we got back in the car and drove it home. So, it's come a long, long way since then.
Lee Petty was one of the sport's founders and pioneers. In fact, the day Richard Petty started his first NASCAR race in 1958, Lee won. Richard finished 17th after hitting the wall. It was Lee's 35th victory, and he would win 19 more before the fiery crash at Daytona Beach in 1961. The accident that nearly took his life. The accident that ended Lee's racing career, that forced a tough new beginning for Richard.
Mother and Daddy spent 4 months in Daytona, never come home. We went down a couple times to see them, but they left the whole thing up to us, so we had to make it work. So I think I grew up overnight. I really think I did, is just to know the responsibilities. Up to that time, I had no responsibilities because I just drove the car. If we needed some tires, Daddy paid for them. I didn't worry about them. I'd go order them. Need a new car, I'd go get a new car, let Daddy worry about it. But all of a sudden, I had to worry about ordering the car and also paying for the thing. So it was a very sobering part of my life that I grew up not in years as far as age, but in years as far as knowledge. And it made me look at everything from a grown-up prospect instead of a teenage deal.
What a way to grow up, to be in on the start of a brand new sport.
When we got out of school in the summer, we just load up the car and away we'd go, and we'd be gone 2 or 3 months at a time. And you go on a northern tour and be gone 2 weeks, or go out west. We went to South Dakota, we went to Nebraska, we went to Iowa. We ran all them races back in 53, 54, back in then. And So, you know, it was great. We was the only kids in school that went out of North Carolina during the summer, so we thought it was great.
The Petty summers were family affairs. That hasn't changed from generation to generation. Sharon is Richard's oldest daughter and remembers them with mixed emotions.
When we would go places, we traveled the entire summer. We were never home, ever. And I was always so glad to get back to school to see people, because I never got to see anybody over the summer and did not have to live out of a suitcase. And now I look back and I think, gosh, what experiences, you know, I had.
Daddy used to crank the cars up and drive them up and down the highway, and we'd all ride in the cars up and down the highway before we ever went to the racetracks. So, you know, I just thought that's the way all kids did. I figured everybody's father had a race car somewhere.
In those early years, NASCAR ran as much on dirt as asphalt. Most of the tracks were under a mile. But then, almost as though it was planned, along came Richard Petty and these things we now know as super speedways.
The first super speedway race I ever ran was at Daytona, and they had just opened the racetrack in 1959. And we drove through the tunnel, and that was the biggest thing I ever seen, about like looking at the Atlantic Ocean as far as I was concerned. I had seen Darlington, but I hadn't run Darlington. So, you know, at that time, the only super speedway was Darlington. Everything else was, you know, 3/4 mile, most of it was half mile, 1/3 of a mile track, stuff like that. So we went to Daytona, it was just unreal how big the racetrack was. And here I was, a 21-year-old kid and never driven but maybe 8 or 10 races, and all of a sudden they throw you out on that thing. And you know, we went down there and they got all the drivers together and said, okay, this is a new speedway, nobody's ever been on it. As far as drivers, they don't know what's going on, so I want you to go out and run 3 or 4 laps on the flat, you know, just to look at the track and see how things feel and stuff like that. I went out pit road, went around that flat, went around the flat in 3 and 4, and I said, I don't need to be down here. Go in the first corner right up on, they black flagged me, make me come back in and said, look, we told you not to, you know, but here I was, like I say, a kid didn't know nothing, green as gourd, and just jumped out there and run. And but, you know, I qualified at a fantastic 129 mile an hour. I mean, you know, we go out in a street car and run that fast now.
No one dreamed of running 200 miles an hour in those early days, nor did they ever even dare to dream of what other heights the sport might reach. It became a huge business, team budget several $1 million a year. That good old boy, red clay racing, is now America's largest spectator sport. Fan loyalty to his or her favorite driver translates in loyalty to sponsors. Where else do you see grown men proudly sporting T-shirts designed after a box of laundry detergent? For 3 generations now, the Pettys have been participating in the rewards of stock car racing. By the time he was 30, Kyle, Richard's only son, had already won over $3 million. So the Petty presence continues, perhaps for another generation as well.
I've been racing now for, 8 or 10 years, and my children begin to go with me. I've got 2 little boys, and they are beginning to spend the summers going to racetracks with me, so maybe someday they'll follow in my footsteps.
Grandpa Richard has it pretty much in perspective.
This is my office. This is where I make my living. It's really a 1990 Pontiac Grand Prix, and they call it stock, but there's really not a whole lot of stock about it. This is the way I like to go racing, but there's a lot of other forms that you can go racing in.
He's talking about these, Indy cars or open wheel races. Doesn't do to have claustrophobia if you're driving one of these. Or sprint cars. Chris Economaki calls them streamlined, bobtailed racers. They race in the Midwest, on big asphalt tracks and on dirt tracks. Doesn't matter, fans love them. All those cars go in circles. If this one does, it's in deep trouble. This is a dragster, built to go very fast for a very short distance, hopefully in a straight line. And guess what? Richard Petty raced dragsters. And these cars, every one of them, come from various buildings just like this. Shops, sometimes located right behind their owners' and drivers' homes. That the man is larger than life is deceiving. His modest way understates his awesome skills and the size and scope of what goes on here in Level Cross. Patriarch Lee Petty nowadays pilots a lawnmower outside the little white house, which is the Petty homestead. Next door, the Petty racing facility has grown large and complex, and Richard is no absentee landlord.
This is the maintenance part of the shop. This is where we do all the work. The boys usually come in about 7 o'clock in the morning and usually work till 5 days a week. And then if we got any extra work, then naturally they got to stay over and do that. And then we've got a few of the boys that go to the races with us, and they go on the weekends, so they're gone 7 days a week. Let me see if I can find Dale here and get him to explain some of the stuff that goes on in here. While we're looking for him, I come up on this car here. They're getting this one ready. They completely disassembled the car, but they're putting it all together. They got it all painted, and you see this silver stuff on the firewall here. That's to try to keep some of the heat out of the car. That's supposed to help 20 or 30 degrees, and that came from the space shuttle. Here's my cousin Dale Inman. He's the crew chief, and he'll show you all around a little bit. Probably show you some stuff that I don't even know anything about.
We take a lot of pride in having our cars looking as good as possible. Of course, a lot of times with the schedule that we try to keep, sometimes you just have to patch them up and go or wipe them off and go. We try to have enough cars that we don't have to do that. Of course, it's got to the last several years that you have to have 2 cars instead of 1. You always have to have a backup car, and so it don't get no easier on us old people.
This shop and the team members have changed dramatically since Richard, brother Maurice, cousin Dale built and maintained the race cars by themselves. Now there are specialists by the score, fabricators, engine builders, chassis specialists, designers, engineers, and for good reason.
In the olden days, you would never see anything like you have before us here in a race shop. This is a blueprint. The car behind us was built strictly from these blueprints. Years ago, you would have a screwdriver and a hammer, and that was about the extent of it. To see a blueprint like this in a race shop is very unusual to what it was in the old days.
Is it worth it? Does it pay off? Well, right there next to the shop in the Petty Museum are the tangible symbols of 4 decades of work.
My career for the future is being done across the street at the build-up shop. This is my career in the past. I would imagine that if you walk through here and stuff, you can see Richard Petty's personality. You see all the pictures, you see where he started, what he's been able to accomplish and stuff. So his life sort of flashes in front of you as you walk through the museum, and you see the good times and you see the bad times. So we're not trying to hide anything or build anything up. We just throw it in here and say, okay, what you see is what you get.
Though Richard and his team haven't added a winner's trophy since July 1984, there's always the next race. That's what they all work toward every day. What goes on in the shop is all prelude. It's at the track that the car, the team, and the driver really come together. The racetrack. The ultimate proving ground, where you find out if all that planning, all that work was worthwhile. And at the track, it's anything but casual and easygoing. Example, take a Friday in Richmond, Virginia.
It's been extremely hot here today, and we've been reading the tire temperatures and measuring shock travel, and we've made a couple of spring changes, and the Richard seemed to think it's a little bit better, and I've been on the truck watching him. It seemed like he could run lower once we changed the 2 left side springs. Of course, the first thing we done was change the rear shocks. They were a little bit too soft, so we went stiffer with them. But mainly, you just read the tire temperatures and the shock travel, and then what the driver feeds back to you. And I think we've helped the car a little bit.
When you're in this league, speed is an art for the crew and, of course, the driver. For instance, there are lots of ways to drive around a racetrack. A good driver will seek out, find the fastest line or the groove, and adapt it to his advantage.
Well, a groove on a racetrack is basically where the majority of the cars run. And most of the time, the groove is the fastest way around the racetrack. You go to a dirt track, you'll see the mud on high and the mud down low, and where it's packed down, that's the groove. On an asphalt track, you'll see where the darkest marks are. That's where the majority of the cars run. That's the fastest way around the racetrack. And, you know, from time to time, especially on super speedways, the groove changes. You'll start out running on the inside. The first thing you know, you'll run high. Then that groove will give out and you'll come back to the middle of the racetrack or something. But on most of the short tracks and stuff, the groove's just as close as you can get to the inside of the racetrack. That's usually the fastest way around.
You know, there's always usually one fastest way around, and a lot of times we're not looking for a faster way when we're looking at a different groove. You know, if you can't get around somebody because they're running the groove that you want, you got to come up with a different groove, whether it's one you like or not. But you got to look for something different. So that's why you see some unusual grooves out there.
And then there's the gray area.
Well, the gray area is where that you don't want to get. That's the gray area on the racetrack is most of the time is an unusable portion of the racetrack as far as racing surface. The only time you use it if you have trouble or you got to miss somebody, then you'll use the gray area. But the gray area of the racetrack is not a functional part as far as really the racing groove. A lot of times you'll see a real wide racetrack, and the black marks will be around the inside, and you wonder what they're doing with all the rest of the racetrack. Why don't they move the guardrail down? But that's your escape route. Most of the time, you would just say that if looking at a gray area, that's where you make a mistake or somebody makes a mistake. That's where you try to correct it at.
Correct it or take advantage of a slower opponent. To get to the front, you must pass somebody. Mr. Richard Petty on the art of passing.
Well, your passing strategy from a short track to a super speedway is completely different. It's hardly ever that on a short track that you pass cars on the outside. Most all of your passing on the short tracks are done on the inside. You beat a man into the corner or you beat him off the corner, and most of the time it has to be done on the inside. You run a super speedway, most of the time you got an alternative. Sometimes you pass them on the inside, and if they get to trying to cut you off and not give you enough room on the inside, you just try the outside. So a lot of times on a super speedway, the outside groove is just as fast as the inside. So again, it's completely different strategy of how you set a man up, because on a super speedway, you've got two chances. You got an inside and outside. Majority of times, 90% on a short track, you got to do it on the inside.
Though Richard Petty is still considered the king of all stock car racing, it is becoming a sport of specialists. Example, Rusty Wallace. He can win on any track, but there's something about road courses that makes him a specialist. A road course like the old Riverside International Raceway in California.
I got a car that handles good. We built it strictly for the road courses. I've tested a lot. Test a lot at, Watkins Glen and Sears Point. And plus, I like the road courses. I can sling them around and throw them, and don't have to worry about a restrictor plate or anything like that.
Then there are the short tracks, less than a mile, like Richmond International Raceway, just made for the aggressive style of a Dale Earnhardt.
It's just closer racing. It's a little different atmosphere. The speedways, you want to stay smoother, straighter line. Short tracks, you can wrestle a car around a little bit if it's not handling well, or if you need to get around somebody, you can wrestle it and make it go places you really shouldn't sometimes. And stick it in holes you shouldn't go in, or maybe some other guys wouldn't go through. But you take a little more chance on a short track, I think, than you do a speedway.
And the super speedways with critical bank turns, 200-mile-an-hour straightaways, and a racing strategy called drafting. Bill Elliott is a master draftsman.
But the biggest thing at Daytona and Talladega is just learning how to maneuver traffic and knowing things could happen in a hurry. And the draft seems to be the biggest part of any of this business. And since a restrictor plate, now drafting has become even more critical, because you sure can't run side by side or by yourself, or you'll be totally in the back.
But the roots of most NASCAR drivers are buried in good old dirt. Saturday night dirt, short track dirt. Mr. Richard Petty on the art of driving on dirt.
You got to figure that it's been 1970 since I drove a dirt track race, and at that time, we wasn't all out race cars as they are today, but we had the big Hemi engines, had plenty of power. didn't have a whole lot of brakes on the car, but you didn't need brakes on dirt. We used to disconnect the right rear brake altogether, because if you go down the straightaway and touch the brakes, the car would get sideways. And a lot of times it gets sideways before the driver really intended it to. So my technique on driving a dirt track was to run that car as fast as I could and not to get it sideways. In other words, the straighter I could keep that car, the faster I could go. We used to run against these boys that really pleased the crowd. I mean, they'd start finish line, they'd get that car sideways, they'd run through there and throw mud all over the fence and stuff. And while they was out there putting on a show, I just go around the inside and go on, because I tried to drive the car not as deep into the corner, not throw it into the corner, and tried to control the car where I could keep the back end sort of behind the front wheel so that I could get some hope.
Richard Petty's been fighting the back end of a stock car for almost 40 years. He's an athlete. You doubt it? Just try wrestling a 3,500-pound stock car for 5 hours on a hot summer day. Oh, these drivers are athletes, all right.
I tell you, as I get older, I realize more and more that I should have took care of myself when I was younger. Physical fitness has never been a top priority for me. It's getting to be a top priority for a lot of the younger drivers, which is great. I've got nothing against them. I'm glad they're doing it.
I usually spend about close to 3 hours every other day working out in the gym.
The pressures of racing and the speeds and stuff have gotten so much so now that you got to be mentally prepared. You got to be physically prepared, really physically prepared to run 4 hours at 140 or 50 degrees inside the car and still be fresh enough to drive the car when it's over with. But I waited till I was 50 years old before I ever worried about being physical fit, because I figured if I could get out of bed and get in a race car, I was physical fit to drive the car. You know, I've driven with numerous broken bones and stuff like that, and knowed I wasn't really 100% physical fit, but physical enough to be able to drive the car.
Richard, in his humble manner, forgot to mention that he gets plenty of exercise every race weekend. His physical strength is undoubtedly one reason that in his 50s, he's still a competitive racer. That and the incredible safety features built into these machines. How else would you explain a man walking away from something like this? Or this? Or this? Wrecks for Richard Petty are occupational hazards. This one, at the 1988 Daytona 500, was different.
The biggest memory on my mind is the 88 wreck at Daytona, coming off a fourth turn. And what I remember about the wreck is I remember the car getting sideways, and then I remember it backing up toward the wall, getting completely sideways, and starting to the back. And as it started back, the back end of the car lifted. And I can remember, it said, "Richard, you better hold on this steering wheel because it's going to be a wild ride." And I knew that I wanted to hold on really tight because I didn't want my arms squaring around. But see, that at the time the car got sideways. Once I watched the tape, the car turned all the way over, made a 360. I didn't realize that till I got out of the car. And then I seen the tapes and I really realized it. I thought it just got sideways, and I don't remember the turning over part, but then I remember the car backing up, and I can remember the car spinning on its nose 3 times. And then I remember it coming down on the racetrack, and I thought it stopped. In other words, I can, you know what I mean, the car stopped. And then all of a sudden, man, I mean, it was chaos. Man, that thing started spinning, and I had no idea what happened. I mean, I said, well, being it was stopped, must have been in air. You know what I mean? I didn't realize that, but I just, you know, was trying to put it together. But after I seen the tapes, I seen the car did stop, and then the car got hit again and spun. But then it spun around, I don't know, 4 or 5 times or whatever, it spun around, and then it stopped again. And I said, you know, I wonder where I'm at, because with all the slinging around, I went blind. I couldn't see anything. And I think after about the 3rd time that it turned over on its nose, then I didn't see anything. So I didn't see the car coming that hit me. So I didn't get scared or anything because I couldn't see anything. And so the car stopped, and I remember punching the button and telling Dale, I said, I'm okay. And I was out of breath, so that's all I could tell him. And here I had my eyes open, but everything was black. And then all of a sudden, they was all leaning over me and stuff. All of a sudden, this thing started turning gray. You could see, I started seeing outlines of bodies. Time they got me to the infirmary in the infield, then I could see good. Didn't bust a blood vessel in my eye or nothing. It was just, you know, I thought myself, man, these things are going to be black and blue. Not nothing. You know what I mean? It was perfectly clean. Got out of the car, had one little place on my ankle where the clutch had been bent over and hit it. Not a mark anywhere, not a scratch, not nothing. I mean, that fantastic a wreck and all that spinning around and didn't even get a busted blood vessel in your eye. So, you know, the good Lord was with you on that particular situation.
It seems incredible that a driver could walk away from a crash like that, but it happens more often than you think. The ones they don't walk away from are the terrible high-impact crashes where all the force of a 3,500-pound race car stops dead on a wall like this. It might not look safe, and granted, every accident serves as a guinea pig for future safety improvements. But consider how these cars are built. Roll bars have been mandatory for years, but the Pettys came along and added a feature that's now standard.
This particular bar was called a Petty bar, and all the NASCAR rule books and stuff. Used to, when we ran, we didn't have near the roll bars in the car. And first thing it did when we turned over was this side of the car would usually land on it, and then it would go down, and then it'd pull the other bars down over the driver's head. So over a period of time, everybody's used that particular bar to help strengthen the car and to help strengthen the roll bars. Now we run them a little bit different angle than what we did 10 years ago because we've got a lot more bars in the car, but basically it does the same thing.
Pin loaded, pull it out, grab it in the center, and lift it off.
The sanctioning body, NASCAR, expends a great deal of effort in the pursuit of safety on the racetrack. Notwithstanding, it is inside the car itself that is most important. Richard Petty on how to stay safe and comfortable in a stock car.
Well, when we start building a car, the first thing we think about is safety. So part of the construction of the car is done with all the roll bars you see around the car. That helps hold the car together and also protects the driver. We've got bars in both sides of the doors here for side impact. We have a window net here to keep the driver's head or hands and stuff from going out in case he gets hit in the side or turns over. You got padding on all the roll bars, the head padding around for your legs and stuff. Steering wheel's all padded. The seat's made specially to fit each individual body. It's rolled around just so that it'll fit nobody but that one person. We've got a five-point hookup, seat belt, shoulder harness, and a crotch belt. And that takes care of holding the driver in this seat. The seat's padding on each side to keep him from flopping around in the car. Then I guess the next thing you know, you've got to have a helmet naturally to keep from getting beat around. And here we have a helmet, and we run these races for 4 or 5 hours, and your head gets, you know, real tired, your neck gets tired, and you lean over. So we have a deal here that hooks to the top of the helmet to hold the man's head from bouncing around. I've also got, they call it an oxygen mask, but it's not. What it does, we have a filter over on this side over there, and then we pump air into here, and it takes all the carbon monoxide out of the air. So that way you breathe nothing but pure air. Naturally, we have radio communications with a spotter up on top of the grandstand where if anything happens, then he can tell us way ahead of time. And then we have communications with the pits, you know, make a regular pit stop or if you have trouble. And a lot of boys in the summer times and stuff, it's really, really hot in this car. So we have a cool suit or a cool seat where you sit down on the seat and it runs cold air through it. Or sometimes they put it on like a vest and stuff, and it runs cold air through it, and it keeps you cool. So anything that you can do for a driver for 4.5, 5 hours, as far as getting him pure air, cool air, keep him cool, then he's going to be more alert, and it makes everything that much safer.
I talked with him last time he was up there, and
So the driver tries to make himself as safe as he can. But he still must worry about the other drivers in the race. NASCAR calls a mandatory drivers' meeting every race morning to reinforce safety measures and warn against misbehavior on the track.
You don't deliberately supposed to, spin people out and all this kind of stuff. But over a period of years, that's not as gentle. People are not as gentlemanly now as what they used to be. Used to, there was one or two that you had to watch out for. Now there's 10 or 12 you got to watch out for. I don't know that the people are really wanting to do it as much as they just feel compelled to do it because of the pressure that's putting on them from their sponsors and this kind of deal. We've got certain rules that are really brought out, like hand signals. If anything happens in front of you, you turn your hand, throw your hand up. The worse it looks, the more you wave. If you're going to make a pit stop, try to pull over going down the straightaway, let the people behind you know what's going on. These kind of things. But they're brought out in a driver's meeting. Everybody knows about it. Watch your mirror, don't pull down in front of anybody that's coming up on you, hold your line. These are things that brought out. There's a lot of things that are just generally understood of how you handle people, how you do things on the racetrack.
We have talked of the driver and the car and the track on which he runs, but who keeps him out there? What of the crew that anxiously, patiently waits on pit road? This collection of very talented men, every bit as important as speed and spark plugs. The over-the-wall gang are the ones on the line. Risk. There's the front tire changer, his rear tire counterpart, the jack man, the tire carrier, the gas man with his catch can man. Everything has to be executed perfectly and in a matter of seconds, and you can get hurt out there. Those who remain behind include the crew chief, the scorer, those in charge of water and tires, along with various volunteers. Finally, after weeks of preparation and hours of practice time, the whole team is ready to hear the most famous words in racing.
Hey, Richard, can I get a picture with you, partner?
No. Not those words. These.
Okay.
It is a relief to get in the race car, believe me. We ran before a race. You got to worry about fighting the crowd to get in. You get in there, and then there's people wandering through wanting autographs and all this, and all you want to do is get in the race car. Then they run you out there and run you up on a trailer, and you wave at everybody. Then you try to get back to the race car. They're still wanting autographs, taking pictures and stuff.
The fans can be the greatest people in the world, and sometimes when you've had a bad day, they can be sometimes it gets you on your nerves, but you take it and go on and smile. I think that's what's made Richard Petty so great, and that's why I admire Richard Petty so much, is no matter ever what happens, or he's still got that smile on his face and still going in the same direction, and I think that's what it takes to be a great person and a great role model in the sport.
The greatest thing that goes is when they say, gentlemen, start your engine, because you know there's nobody going to come up and take your picture, nobody going to ask you a question. You're buckled in, you're ready to go, then that's your relief point there. So you run a couple of laps under caution and get all that stuff behind you, and then you're ready for the race. So that is my escape. When I go to the racetrack, I'm a captive audience to the people and to the sponsors and all that until the race starts. Then I'm on my own. Then when the race is over, I'm back to those people again. I'm back to whatever the whims are of the fans or the sponsors. Again, when I'm in that race car, if Dale gets to hollering at me on the radio and I don't like what he said, I can turn him off. I can just run around there like I want to, and so it's the only time that Richard Petty feels like he's completely by himself. There might be 100,000 people watching, 10 million people on TV, all this kind of stuff, but you're still by yourself. You're doing your own thing. Might be 39 other cars out there, but you're still doing your own thing at the pace that you want to do it. Sometimes pace not fast enough, but anyhow, you're still doing your own thing, so that's where you just get away from the real world and you get in your own little cocoon and do your own thing.
Contrary to Richard's opinion, he is not alone. There is a crew chief, a coach, helping guide a driver through a race. Now, Richard's crew chief is Dale Inman. Young driver Bobby Hillen gets plenty of guidance from his crew chief.
Very high talks during the race, before the race, after the race. I mean, he's constantly giving instructions, so, I definitely don't have to get lonely out on the racetrack.
Do you ever have to tell him to keep quiet?
No, I don't tell him anything. I say 10-4 and yes, sir, and that's about it.
I don't think you're going to hear Richard Petty say yes, sir, and no, sir. But wait.
Richard, it looks like them other tires might be a little bit the best, but I really ain't seen nothing to really tell for sure. You know what I'm saying? I got you. We're not running all that bad, but we just can't get out of traffic, you know what I mean? But Kyle's up there pretty good, and the Ford, Lake Speed, and all them, okay? Wiggle them tires around, Richard, because they're new. They're going to get one to go over there, Richard. They're going to get one to go over there. Okay.
Sometimes the radio, as it does for so many of us on our drive to work, simply provides distraction from the frustration of finishing a race long ago lost.
Well, I tell you, frustration comes in a lot of different forms. Frustration comes when you've worked all week and you really think you got a good setup and they throw the flag and they all run off and leave you. Or frustration comes when you run halfway through the race and got everything controlled, and all of a sudden you make a pit stop and you go back out and they got a caution flag, everybody else gets a free pit stop and you're sitting there a lap behind. That kind of frustration. Or you put on a set of tires and the car pushes, you put the next set of tires on, the car's loose. Or you running last lap and motor blows up. That's frustration. There's a lot of different things that can be figured into frustration as far as just really mixing up stuff. But, it all comes down to how you can adapt to that. If you can run and the car don't work good, then you try to make adjustments and try to salvage as much out of it as you can. So that's the way you overcome it. If somebody spins you out, you go out and run as good as you can, or something happens to the car, a bad pit stop or something, you still try to get everything you can out of that particular deal to keep from being frustrated. I've run a bunch of races that I've won, and when the race was over, I didn't feel that I did a good job. I felt like I should have done better. I've run a lot of other races where I run second or 10th or 12th or whatever, and know in my mind that nobody could have done a better job under the circumstances that I had to drive under. So a lot of times I covered my frustration with that particular thought.
The present-day practitioners of the art of speed constantly push closer and closer to the edge. And Richard?
I tell you what, I look at life probably a little bit different than most people, or a lot of people, and I look at it different now than I did 30 years ago. I sit down every once in a while and just look around and see my home and see my family and see the museum with all the stuff and see all the wins that I've had, and said, the good Lord was really good to you, Richard. He let you do all this stuff. Now, you can't jump on his back for having adversities, having things that don't go exactly like you want to. So, you got to figure that the Atlantic Ocean's out there and the waves go up and the waves come down. Well, I'm the same way. I go up and I come down, and I'm hoping to go up again, and I hope to come down again. I've had a lot of good years, more good years than anybody's ever had, than anybody will ever have. And then on the other hand, I've had as many bad years as anybody's ever had too. So I feel like it's an even and out deal. Anytime there's a plus, there's got to be a minus to make it balance. And for me to enjoy good times, I have to have bad times. If I had nothing but good times, I'd soon think they was bad. And if I had nothing but bad times, then I know everything was bad. So I got to have good times to realize when the bad times is there. So it's just an equalizing deal that, the sun comes up, the sun goes down, I go up, I go down, and I have to learn to live with that. And I probably couldn't have done it quite this good 10 years ago. But in the last 4 or 5 years we run and not won races, I've learned to live with it and learned to appreciate the good times that we have had. And we still have good times, we just don't win races. So I still enjoy life, I still enjoy driving the race car, and you know, what else is there?
Ah, but this is the man with the ultimate comparison on winning and losing. The sensations of winning, he will tell you, are much more vivid. He has a record 7 Daytona 500 trophies. The 1979 Daytona 500 was one of the most spectacular finishes in history. It was CBS Sports' first Winston Cup Daytona telecast. I remember it well. I was the announcer.
It's all come down to this. Out of turn 2, Donnie Allison in first. Where will Cale make his move? He comes to the inside. Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. They hit again. They drive in the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. They slide down to the inside. Coming down. Richard Petty is now pulling out in front. Darrell Waltrip is in second. A.J. Foyt is in third. Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front at the line. Waltrip to the inside. Petty wins it.
That may have been the most incredible of Richard Petty's many dashes to the checkered flag, but it was not the most unbelievable. That honor goes to the finish of the 1984 Firecracker 400 at Daytona. Petty beat Cale Yarborough to the finish line by mere inches and won his 200th career victory.
You know, looking back right now, the biggest race that I've ever won was the 200th race, because it was the last one I won, but it was 200. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, the 100th race was a big deal because nobody had ever won 100 races. But, you know, now I won 200, nobody's won 200. But, you know, doing the 200th race on the 4th of July with the President of the United States in attendance, I mean, the flag waving and the whole deal, beat Cale Yarborough on the last lap. You know, the last 3 foot was when I got in front of him, all this kind of stuff. It couldn't have been a better deal. They can make these racing movies and make them as unbelievable as they want to, but nothing is unbelievable as what I got into in those circumstances. And if you'd have written a story like that, they would have thrown it out because it's being impossible for it to happen, but it happened to me. And there again, I overcome a lot of adversities by looking back and say, just how dadgum lucky could you be in any one given day to do all the things that you really wanted to do, and everything came out 100%. So, you know, if you get a day that don't come out to 55%, you just have to live with it.
Since that victory, Richard Petty's days at the racetrack have ended more often than not, like this.
Like it just died. Like it just died. Come in, let's see if we pull it off. Back. Tell me what you wanted me to do. Go to the trunk, Richard. Go to the trunk.
There are those who advise Richard to retire. His wife, Linda, knows better.
He can't. He loves it, and that's what keeps him out there. And, you know, that's the thing that really bothers me when people say, why don't he quit? You know, why don't you make him quit? But that's not easy. That has to come from within that person. And nobody can make Richard Petty quit.
The only thing that's lacking is winning races. But on the other hand, I don't want to trade and say, okay, I want to win some races and trade all the other good parts of life away. You know, from that standpoint, even if we don't never win a race, then I think we're going to be happy with what's going on. And I'm still happy when I get in that race car. I still love to drive a race car, and you know, as long as I do that, then I'm not endangering myself or somebody else, and I'll probably still be in there digging along.
And what does the son he taught so well say about it?
To talk to him about racing and to be around him in racing and to hear how he explains things, it's like having my little boy, Adam or Austin, explain how they got a new Christmas toy. You know, when he runs good, it's just like, you know, man, Santa Claus came last night. He just loves the sport, he loves to drive, and if he's going to drive until he's 90 years old, then that's fine with me.
Kyle is right, you know. Sunday afternoons at the racetrack are better for the presence of Richard Petty. Grace and style and rich memories and a lot of skill abound when 43 is surging through the pack toward the lead. So King Richard, race till you're 90. Live to be 100. Or 200 if you like. I'm Ken Squire.